Court. This happened a little more than an hour ago. It concerns this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was deported to El Salvador almost a month ago. The Trump administration called his inclusion in the deportation an administrative error. He's locked up in the country's notorious Secot prison, built to confine alleged convicted terrorists and gang members under very harsh conditions. Now, the administration, while admitting it made mistakes, also said it cannot get him back, despite a lower court order to make it happen. And a little more than an hour ago, the Supreme Court weighed in, though perhaps not in a way that settles the matter once and for all, saying the administration must abide by the lower court's order to, quote, facilitate his return. Here to help us sort it out, former federal prosecutor, best-selling Supreme Court biographer Jeffrey Toobin. I want to read just from the court ruling. The order properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, I think it's just worth pausing to recognize this was an extraordinary, unanimous rebuke of the Trump administration.
That's a big deal from this Supreme Court.
From this Supreme Court with 6 conservatives on it. The fact that they all agreed that the Trump administration should try to facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia to the United States. But what does that mean in the real world? The Trump administration has already said Mr. Garcia is in the custody of El Salvador. We have no control over prisons in El Salvador, so we can't get him back. Now, given the relationship,
I mean, that seems absurd, given that they're paying them $6 million or whatever to hold these people.
Right, and given the very close relationship, particularly between this administration and the current El Salvador government, it seems like this is something that they could facilitate if they wanted to. But what remains mysterious about this order is what happens if Mr. Garcia doesn't come back. And how does the court try to enforce something that's entirely in another country under the control of another government? That's left very much open by this order.
And who would decide that? A lower court?
Well, for the time being, a lower court will administer the return, but ultimately they have very limited jurisdiction over what goes on in El Salvador. So the direction is to our government, and the question is, how hard will the Trump administration try to get Mr. Garcia back, if at all?
One can make an argument they might not want him back. They don't want him giving interviews. They don't want that story continuing. And there could just be a nod and a wink, and the El Salvador government could say no.
The Trump administration's approach to this whole case has been like something one of my law professors used to say, which is some people think some crimes are so terrible that not even innocence is a defense. In other words, because he was even mistakenly accused of being involved in this gang, that means he has to be treated like he's in this gang. And so he's stuck in this hellhole in El Salvador with no recourse. Now, I think it's certainly good news for him that the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to try to get him back, but whether he gets back, it's unclear.
Yeah, Jeff Toobin, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Now, the markets and fresh evidence that what the president has unleashed on 401ks and the global economy with his tariff policy has not been
Congressman Jasmine Crockett is a Democrat of Texas. She serves on both the Oversight and Judiciary Committee. She served as a public defender before she went to Congress, and she joins me now. First, Congressman, it feels like we have been in this kind of some version of a constitutional crisis or showdown between the courts and this administration almost since day one. Are you heartened, at least, by the unanimity of the decision of the court saying at least siding with the district judge provisionally here?
I mean, to a certain extent, I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship. I think all Americans may feel like we're in an abusive relationship with this administration as well as with the Supreme Court that struggles to really earn the trust of American citizens, right? And at a time in which we really are wondering whether or not there is going to be this ultimate clash between an order from the Supreme Court and this administration, again, we're kind of in this space where they're basically saying in a unanimous way, which again, as you pointed out, doesn't happen very often, they are saying, you know what, we all agree. And it is very difficult to get them to all agree on anything. So we will see what this administration does. But as far as I'm concerned, if you can figure out how to get them down there, you can figure out how to get them back.
One thing that has been clear in the early polling that we have, and again, polling is inexact, but to the extent that we have a sense across different polling outlets, is that the approval rating is relatively low for the sitting president. It's now sitting in the low 40s. He's underwater, as we say. The one issue that he is doing relatively well at is on immigration. And there's a kind of line of argumentation that comes from certain quarters, which is Democrats should just keep quiet about that. And you can't convince people on this stuff, and they kind of want to see these deportations. I wonder how you feel about that in terms of making an affirmative case here about why this practice that they have put into effect is indeed wrong, and whether that's a case that you can effectively make.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can always make an effective case, Chris, but I will tell you that what this tells us, though, is that their propaganda is working, right? And that is what's so dangerous. This administration has someone that is heading up DHS that is going out there cosplaying with guns that it's clear she don't even know how to operate the guns. And, you know, she's taking these photos, you know, with people, and they're telling them, yeah, they're Venezuelan gang members, right? And so they are telling people, listen, we're getting rid of the bad people, right? And we don't have enough stories because obviously they decided they were going to get rid of due process to know whether or not you really are going and getting the bad guys. There's somebody straight out of Dallas, Texas, who literally was snatched up and sent off to this same place because he had an autism tattoo, you know, and so they don't know the real stories. They only know what they're presented with. And we know that for whatever reason, when Trump and his cronies present lies, the American people fall in love. But the reality of this administration is a whole other story.
There's also a question here about whether Congress tries to reassert any role in this. I mean, this has been, there's the Alien Enemies Act, which has been declared. Congress has basically taken this sort of posture on everything from immigration policy to the core functions of taxation, which you know, are given the power over in the Constitution quite clearly, to basically let the president do whatever he wants. And I wonder if you think, can you envision a set of circumstances in which that starts to change, or have you sort of accepted that as the baseline for Republicans going forward and they're not going to change that?
I can't find a spine anywhere in the house. So no, I don't really see it changing. I mean, and this is knowing that this is going to harm so many people in their own districts. When we start to talk about these tariffs are not limited to any one type of people. It's not limited to Democrats, Republicans, or independents. It's not limited to urban or rural. We know for a fact, if we look back just at his last administration, what it did to the soybean farmers, right? And we ultimately ended up having to give them money to supplant the fact that they lost so much money. But this crazy tariff war that nobody asked for, where he basically is invoking emergency powers, the same thing that he did under the Alien Enemies Act, like the fact that no one is questioning his mental acuity or fitness to serve is beyond wild to me, right? Like the fact that they sat around, called Joe Biden Sleepy Joe Biden, and as I said before, at least you could sleep at night because you didn't have to worry about your 401k disappearing overnight. You didn't have to worry about these allegations of fake invasions.
There were no dissents here. The administration did not even get Clarence Thomas or Samuel Alito or Neil Gorsuch on their side writing in their defense. So to put it lightly, that is not very common from this court when it comes to high stakes issue having to do with paying deference to Donald Trump. Leah Littman is a professor at University of Michigan Law School, co-host of the Strict Scrutiny podcast, along with Melissa Murray and my wife, Kate Shaw. She's also the author of a forthcoming book, Lawless, which is out next month, and you can pre-order now. Leah, it's great to have you on the program. I guess just this stuff gets very complicated procedurally, but what is your reading of this unanimous order from the court?
So it is good news. It's better than what might have happened, but I think it's far from perfect and it's far from over, because what the Supreme Court did is they left in place the portion of the district court order that required the government to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's return. But they indicated that the district court needed to clarify what the court meant by directing the government to effectuate, i.e. actually bring about Mr. Abrego Garcia's return. And they suggested that the court might actually lack the power to direct the government to effectuate the return. So that creates this kind of liminal space. What's the difference between facilitate and effectuate? What can the district court actually order the government to do? Can the government come back and say, well, we tried, and El Salvador said, no, sorry, we won't return him? Would that be sufficient? And that's a sort of ambiguity that the Supreme Court's decision left open, and that I'm very concerned the administration is going to try to drive a truck through and, take advantage of that ambiguity to delay, if not prevent, Mr. Abrego Garcia's return.
Yeah, I mean, we should say the district court judge here is Judge Boasberg, who has been the subject of a lot of.
So this judge is actually Judge Zinnes.
I'm sorry, this is not the Boasberg one. The Boasberg one is another. Thank you very much. Is another line of cases having to do with the Alien Enemies Act. This judge here had said, the district court judge had said basically, you have to go bring this guy back. Like, this is not right. You can't just say, nothing we can do. What do you want, Judge? Right? So the Supreme Court basically rejects the argument by the Department of Justice arguing for Trump that, like, there's nothing we can do. They stop short of saying you must bring him back, and they come down in the middle of, like, you got to try, basically.
I think that that's right. And I think that's why we can't give the Supreme Court too much credit right now. We have to wait to see what they are actually going to do by way of enforcing the order. And specifically, are they going to allow the court to hold the administration's feet to the fire and actually prove what the administration has tried to do and prove that doing other things might not be possible? Because the reality is that the administration negotiated an agreement with El Salvador. So El Salvador is detaining individuals pursuant to an agreement with the United States. And I think that makes it very likely that a single phone call from President Trump, the United States, could make El Salvador return Mr. Abrego Garcia. And the fact that they haven't done that already is appalling. And I'm very concerned that they are going to do what they have been doing in all of these other cases and try to obscure and obfuscate and go into court